Chairwoman Green, Vice Chair Kuntz, Vice Chair Scott, members of the committee. My name is Jake Morabito, and I serve as Director of the Communications and Technology Task Force, as well as the Energy, Environment, and Agriculture Task Force at ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak before your committee today to share some more about ALEC's nonpartisan research and analysis, as well as the efforts of our members across all 50 states on digital assets, blockchain, and cryptocurrency policy. I hope you find this testimony valuable as Michigan considers its own approach in this area. For some brief background, ALEC is a Virginia-based nonprofit, nonpartisan organization of state legislators from across the country. Our members discuss and develop model public policies rooted in the foundational Jeffersonian tradition of limited government, free markets, and federalism, values that empower states and citizens alike. To help the committee and your colleagues decide the best regulatory approach that fits the needs and interests of Michiganders, I will share more about 3 essential ALEC model policies developed by our members that will help your state establish a strong foundation for our digital future. A few of them have already been mentioned earlier today. Appreciate the setting the stage for these. And so members...
Well, that was Jake Morabito. I hope I said his name right. Now, I have to say from the outset, I am a former member of ALEC when I served in the Illinois General Assembly. It's one of the greatest organizations. Some of the ideas that come out of ALEC you're seeing play out in state houses across the country. But that's why today we're going to be joined by Jake. He's a leader on the front lines of tech and policy. As Senior Director of the Communications and Technology Task Force at the American Legislative Exchange Council, Jake has worked to ensure free market principles guide the ever-evolving tech landscape. As you heard, he recently testified before Michigan lawmakers on 2 landmark financial bills. House Bill 4510, which would allow public retirement funds to invest in Bitcoin and Ethereum via exchange-traded products, and House Bill 4511, which would prohibit Michigan from adopting or accepting a central bank digital currency, or CDBC. These proposals strike at the heart of today's debate over financial autonomy, digital innovation, and government overreach. Jake, welcome to Detroit's Morning Answer with John Anthony.
Thanks so much for having me on, John. Pleasure to have you be reunited with ALEC.
Yeah. Do we? Can I, as a former legislator, can I still be a member of ALEC? I don't know.
I was going to say you're an ALEC alumni, so you're always welcome back. So.
Oh, well, let's start with HB 4510. Why is allowing Michigan's public retirement systems to invest in Bitcoin, and I hope I'm saying it right, Ethereum, such a game changer, and why now?
Yeah, well, one thing to note is, there's a lot, cryptocurrency and Bitcoin have been on the scene. I think it was back in 2009, around kind of that late 2000s, early 2010s era is when it was first created, and it's only become more mainstream since then. And, no matter whether you own cryptocurrency or Bitcoin yourself, it's something that legislators are going to have to adapt to this new reality of digital payments and this concept of digital assets. So lots of states right now are looking into their existing financial services laws and how do we modernize the statutes and kind of update our flows to allow innovators to revolutionize how we can exchange with peer-to-peer payments, or even those who just want to maybe invest in an ETF or other, they want to invest their hard-earned dollars and beat inflation. So this is something that both consumers and the government itself, in the case of those pension funds, like you mentioned, or state investments, they're looking at is how do we hedge against inflation besides just the typical financial tools available.
Right. As you know, there's always 2 sides to a coin. Some supporters say this gives retirees access to higher returns and future-proof assets. But then you have the critics who warn it's too risky. What safeguards or regulations would need to be in place to make this work responsibly?
Yes, that's a good question, and something that everyone should keep in mind is that it's not a foolproof investment, as we've seen. The trajectory goes up and down, but there are some guardrails in place in some provisions, like in HB 4510. One is there's a certain percentage cap usually. Usually the fund can't consist of maybe it's 5% or 2%. There's some sort of a low threshold that can only be composed of cryptocurrency. So that you aren't having the entire state system being converted over to Bitcoin. It's kind of like any other portfolio where you're going to hedge your investments and have several different investment classes that you're investing in. So that way, if one investment maybe isn't doing so well, you have some backups to help the fund overall continue to grow. So you have that, and then also there's different categories of state funds. So you have the state pensions, but there's also things like state rainy day funds, and each of those have different goals. So, for instance, the rainy day fund is a more steady investment, usually more safe investment. So if a state treasurer decides maybe that's not as appropriate, they can scale back. But it is a real problem we're seeing with inflation, right? Is we're having just if you have kind of a safe investment that's only growing at 1% or something like that, and then you have 3%, 4% inflation, that means taxpayers are losing money. The state treasurer is losing money, and so allowing the investments in Bitcoin and allowing the state treasurer to have that flexibility I think that is helpful overall for taxpayers.
Yeah, when I think about, I remember when we were in Illinois looking to fix the pension. It was I voted for the bill and I got a lot of heat from it. But when you look at allowing crypto investment via the exchange traded product ETPs, potentially helping state pensions stay solvent without does it help state pensions stay solvent without hiking taxes or cutting benefits?
Right. They shouldn't do that. And there are another guardrail in there. Usually there's some sort of a threshold as to which types of cryptocurrency are allowed. So you mentioned HB 4510 in Michigan. It's the threshold would essentially only allow Bitcoin and Ethereum to be invested because they have such a high market capitalization. Bitcoin, I believe, it's over $2 trillion in market cap right now, and Ethereum's $300 billion. So I think the threshold in the bill was that they can only invest in cryptocurrencies that have over $250 billion. So that means some of these other coins that maybe they have more fluctuation and they aren't seen as safe as investments at the moment. They have to meet that high threshold. So that's another protection. They aren't going to be investing in some random cryptocurrency coin that just came up overnight. Bitcoin is seen as a much more established product at this point. And it is different than other types of cryptocurrency because there is no one centralized actor controlling the network. There's a limitation on how much Bitcoin can be mined. So it is seen by some of these states as different than the other forms of cryptocurrency, even Ethereum.
Jake, I'm still kicking myself because a friend of mine came to me back in, I believe it was 2009, maybe 2010, said, give me $1,000, I'll make you a millionaire. And I didn't listen to him. And I still kick myself to this day because I would be probably a multi-millionaire by now if I had bought it back then. But when you look at this from a national standpoint, could Michigan become a leader among states in how they're modernizing their public fund strategies, or are there other states already ahead?
Yeah, other states aren't waiting by. Like a lot of your listeners may have heard Texas, for instance, like so many other things. They're really pioneering the way in making the Lone Star State the home for a lot of these new tech innovations, energy innovations, and Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is no exception. And so states like Michigan can really use this as an opportunity to fight back against excessive government overreach and help protect financial privacy. So that's where HB 4511 comes in. So it has that is more focused on consumers in Michigan who hope to use digital assets and cryptocurrency. So, for instance, if Michigan HB 4511 were to pass, it would ban the state prevent the state from banning individuals from owning crypto. So in case there was a ban ever, it would also not allow the state to require you to have a license to have cryptocurrency. So again, it's essentially freedom of Michiganders to transact in the way that they choose, whether that's through a cryptocurrency or through a traditional financial institution.
For those that are unfamiliar, what are the core dangers of a government-issued CBDC, especially from a privacy or surveillance standpoint?
Yeah, I'm happy to go into that. So something that the federal government under the Biden administration had been studying is something called a central bank digital currency. And what that would entail is essentially transforming our current cash dollar system into a digital dollar run through a cryptocurrency. And what's different from that is currently our banking system, there are different private sector intermediaries along the way. So your bank, it's heavily regulated by the government, but it itself is not a government agency. Whereas this time you would be transacting directly with the U.S. Department of Treasury or another sub-agency, and they would have unprecedented visibility potentially into your specific transactions, how your different thresholds that are of what you can and cannot do with your cryptocurrency as your U.S. dollar. So some who are very concerned about their personal privacy and invasion of privacy, they're concerned about the government being granted this much power. And yet people look to situations like up north with the Canadian trucker situation a few years ago, where they, the prime minister invoked unprecedented emergency powers that really limited their ability to even take cash out of their bank accounts, or essentially froze them out of the economy. And we don't want to have that, even though the current presidency, for instance, they've expressly said they're not supporting a central bank digital currency. Yeah. States can fight back against this effort by putting into their laws that they will not support this effort, and they will not allow a CBDC to be used for payment.
While you were there testifying before the Michigan House, did you hear bipartisan concerns over CBDCs, or is this still viewed as a partisan issue?
It's fairly bipartisan, and I'd say in Michigan and in other states. For instance, Indiana passed this legislation on wide bipartisan lines. Another issue that I heard when I was testifying in Michigan as well is, folks are very concerned about crypto scams and fraud that have to do. People hear about the FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried stuff. They remember NFTs a few years ago. And it's important to kind of separate those things out, and I think lawmakers want to target the real fraud. And, there's plenty of consumer protection laws on the books, and those can probably be beefed up to help, target those legitimate scams. But there are legitimate uses, and we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater on this.
Taken together, HB 4510 and HB 4511, in my opinion, they seem to send a strong message. Michigan wants financial freedom, not federal control. Is that the right read?
I think that's exactly right. I mean, like so many things these days, Congress seems utterly unable or unwilling to act on some of these highly important issues at the moment, like artificial intelligence regulation or protecting our kids online. And this is no exception. A lot of these states like Michigan or Texas or Arizona or New Hampshire, they're not going to wait for cues from Congress. And there is some activity that's moving through. For instance, the Senate just recently passed on a bipartisan vote legislation called the Genius Act, S1582, that has to do with stablecoins. So that's a positive step. We'll see if the U.S. House takes that up. But states aren't going to wait around and let them solve this problem. Then you'll have states like Texas, I think, continue to push the envelope.
Yeah, and I want to shout out the sponsors of these bills. House Bill 4510, Representative Bill Schuett. I hope I'm saying his name right. Go ahead and check out that bill. And House Bill 4511, Representative Brian Posthumus. Those are two strong fighters. I haven't had them on my show yet, but we will. I'm going to do a really quick lightning round with you. CBDC in one word.
Control.
Biggest myth about Bitcoin.
Unsafe.
Better long-term store of value, crypto or gold?
Ooh, I might say gold on that one.
Besides Michigan.
Just for historical reasons.
Best state leading the charge, besides Michigan, best state leading the charge on crypto freedom?
I might have to give that to Texas at the moment.
Really? Are you saying that because, you love Texas?
Well, I'm from California originally. My home state doesn't get anything right, it seems. So.
Well, Jake, that we got to leave it there. But I want my my membership reinstated because I'm so glad that I've gotten to get back in contact with ALEC, because you guys are doing God's work and continue to work hard. And next time you're in Michigan, look me up if you're testifying.
Yeah, and if any of your listeners are interested in learning more about how this works or kind of what we're up to, visit alec.org, ALEC.org. Lots of good resources out there for the public.
All right, Jake. He's the Senior Director of ALEC's Communications and Technology Task Force. Thanks so much for joining us on Detroit's Morning Answer.